Our next speaker will be Bawa, who's a registered patent attorney licensed to practice before the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And he specializes in biotechnology, nanotechnology, and pharmaceutical patent law. He is a president of the Bawa biotechnology consulting company that does biotechnology and patent law since 2002. He's an adjunct professor at RPI, at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, in addition to serving on the editorial board of numerous nanomedicine-related journals. You can find his biography in Who's Who and elsewhere, I'm sure. We look forward to hearing your talk, Dr.
Thank you.
Get that anyway.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. You've been hearing a lot of clinical data. You've been watching a lot of stuff like that in the last 2 days. My talk for the next 20 minutes is going to be a little bit of a combination of science, law, commercialization, that sort of thing. By the way, how do you forward the slides?
You use the green button.
The big one.
Great, thanks. So what I'm going to discuss is nanopharma, in particular nanomedicine, and how nanoparticles or nanotherapeutics are really making a major impact in nanotechnology, and why is that big pharma is interested in nano, and what are the issues that sort of surround some of it. So before we go on, well, what is nanotechnology? And as you know, everyone has its own definition of nanotechnology. Well, this is my definition of nanotechnology, where I throw out the size range that the NNI comes up with of 1 to 100 nanometers. I feel that pigeonholing is really incorrect. And there's a lot of nanotherapeutics, nanoparticles that are commercialized that are beyond the 100 nanometer particle range. And drug companies could care less if the thing was 200 or 400. They are interested in products that are safer, efficacious, that have advantages in some way to the consumer. So my definition is controlled manipulation, where you at least have something that's superior to its bulk counterpart. That's really what I define as nanotechnology. And that's kind of the theme I will have throughout. And this is another definition of nanotechnology, even more elegant, by the late Richard Smalley. So nano, the realm is found in nature as well as artificially created products or nanomaterials. And the realm is really micro-nano in my idea. And the proper term probably would have been small technology, but we are sort of stuck with nano. And as you know, there's a lot of hype and misinformation, and that's part of why it is, because people just don't really know what nano is or how to define it. And the FDA is still grappling with that. And Dr. Langer gave a talk at the FDA about 3 months ago, and the guy in the back asked him, he said, how would you define nano? And he said, well, how do you guys define it? And they said, we don't know how to define it. And he said, well, you should define it as really all the way up to micron scale. It's pointless to say 1 to 100 nanometers is nanotechnology. There's a lot of products on the market that are, according to the narrow definition of 1 to 100 nanometers, nano products. And there are all sort of things out there. And there's a website that maintains these different products, and you can check it out. They keep adding. There are a couple hundred on there, but obviously there's a lot more because this is a much narrower definition. Now, why is pharma, the reason I'm talking here today, why is pharma so focused on nano, or are they really focused? Well, the business model of pharma is not what it used to be the last few years. There's a lot of blockbuster patents that are going away, and also they're facing a lot of other issues. So they, I could go on and on what the issues are, but those would be some of the big ones. That blockbuster patents are going away, their business models are changing. So they are looking at other issues like other technologies like miniaturization and nanotechnology as well. And this just gives out how, all these blockbuster patents are going away, and the business model which relied upon a few for the pipeline is really not working at the moment. And most of the other big issue is that there are very few NCEs being developed every year. They're usually about 20 to 30 if you count for the last few years. Most of the products on the market are reformulations. And so they're really, they're reinventing the wheel, or there's product line extension, you can say, that sort of thing. And then there's other issues like the FDA and the US Patent Office that in some way is a bottleneck. And the two agencies are really sort of struggling, and they really are very important to the enterprise of nanomedicine or nanotherapeutics, or really any clinical enterprise, because they go hand in hand. Even though patent laws and FDA laws are separate, they do intersect once in a while, but they are very important. And these are just some of the issues that you see at the US Patent Office. My talk is a little bit of an overview. More detailed slides will be on the website. So, I just wanted to hit the high points. There's a lot of issues with the US Patent Office, for example. That's the agency that I deal with more than the FDA. So I obviously, see the issues there more. There has been a real explosion in the number of patents that have been granted on small technologies or nanotechnology in the last decade or so. And there's a lot of overlapping patents issued as well. So a lot of times the players are unaware of who else owns a patent that may overlap or may pose commercialization problems downstream when there's really a product on the market. So given all of this, in the future, obviously, we will see more and more nano in medicine and in pharma, and it's sort of happening already. In nanomedicine, the classic area of research is drug delivery. That is really rapidly moving. And drug delivery, the backdrop, you can look at how it's really, the market has been going up, and it's just going to sort of continue. That is an area that's very robust. Why is, so the talk my title is the particle size, or the size, does that really have an impact? Well, if you look at a bulk material and you reduce it in size, the percentage of atoms on the surface increase. And what does this mean? Well, this means that sometimes that same material, let's say if it's silver, will be a lot more reactive. So you have bulk silver that is inert. You have now nanosilver that's very reactive, so which means it could be toxic. So size can impart properties to a material just by where it is, if it's 100 nanometers versus a bulk. So that's one area where size can impact. And how does this kind of translate into drug delivery? Well, there's a pharmaceutical company that some of you may be aware of. It's called Elan Pharmaceuticals. It's an Irish company. And they have produce products based on that particular property, where they've taken a bulk material, nanonized it, stabilized the surface with grass, and thereby they can now use the same material that may have been shelved into a product. And it has better bioavailability. The solubility in water has increased, so you can give the dose can go down, the toxicity is reduced. And they have a few products on the market based on this nanocrystalline proprietary technology. And this would be an example where simply taking something and bringing it down in size, you have now produced a new line of products for some therapeutics that really previously were shelved. And Rapamune was their first product that was granted a patent and actually went through the FDA approval process, for example. There's a lot of other materials themselves, really, that could be classified as nanomedicines or nanotherapeutics. And these would be tree-like dendrimers that are sometimes 2 to 4 nanometers. You have gold nanoshells, solid nanoparticles, polymers, quantum dots, nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes can also be used for drug delivery. You can have functionalized carbon nanotubes, liposomes, fullerenes. Some of these have been discussed in the last 2 days. Just there's a whole plethora of these nanomedicines, and they're all really materials. Nanotechnology, the backbone of nanotechnology is really nanomaterials. Pegylation, which has been around for a while, also is now being revisited a little bit more, and it obviously offers benefits, as compared to non-pegylation, for example. Dendrimer, this is a rendition, obviously has great advantages. I have a lot of colored slides. I'm just trying to not have too many words so you can take a look at and you can read the details in the later slides that you'll have. The polyvalency of these dendrimers has advantages because it can activate multiple receptors. So that would be an advantage of some of these nanoparticles versus the bulk. Here's an actual therapeutic that's not on the market, but it's in phase 2 right now. It's called it's a gel that's been developed by an Australian company called Star Pharma. And basically what you're looking at, the red is a HIV particle, and the green is a lymphocyte, and the brown is the CD4 receptor of the lymphocyte. So in between the two, you see the dendrimer right here. This is the dendrimer. So this is the receptor, this is HIV, this is the HIV GP160. So what the dendrimer does is it basically intercalates and prevents the binding of the HIV to the CD4 receptor, the lymphocyte, so there's no binding, there's no infection, there's no disease. And this is fast-tracked phase 2, showing pretty good results. Then, we were talking about the previous, you saw in previous slides, speaker's presentation, how the targeting is a big issue, how you can, if you can deliver specific therapeutics into the cell, that would be a great thing. Well, nanoparticles, especially in cancer, you could have, you exploit the EPR effect, so you would have the leakage of the nanoparticles, and you could end up having endocytosis and enhanced intracellular concentration of therapeutic, and this mechanism you could bypass some of the efflux mediated drug resistance that you see. So there's a lot of work going on in that particular arena to enhance the concentration of some of these therapeutics by using nanoparticles and exploiting this EPR effect in cancer. And the other advantage nanotechnology or nano offers to drug delivery is that you can target some of these therapeutics very specifically, as you've seen so far the last 2 days. You can target some of these at a particular site. And there's a lot of examples, a lot of work going on this. There's a lot of preclinical data. Some of these things are in phase testing. And here you're looking at, on the left slide, on the left side, you're seeing a drug particle that has been coated with gold nanoparticles. And then you can functionalize the surface of that, target it to a specific site, let's say a tumor, expressing some of these antigens that the antibodies on decoration would target. And then you can externally use infrared radiation to literally explode it or release the payload at that particular site, and you would have that API at that particular site. So you have this very specific targeting of therapeutics possible as a result of nanotechnology or nanoparticles. Tumor-busting capsules have been developed that are being tested at Rice, for example. There are a lot of other companies. Here's a silica shell that's been coated with gold nanoparticles. So you don't even need a therapeutic. In the previous slide, you actually had an active ingredient. Here, you don't even have that. And the same principle of using external energy to release or cook a tumor at a particular site is possible by these gold nano shells. Carbon nanotubes, especially the functionalized carbon nanotubes, you've heard a lot of negative things about carbon nanotubes. It's like carbon nano, to say that all carbon nanotubes are bad is just sort of, oversimplifying and overgeneralizing, because carbon nanotubes can be single wall, double wall, functionalized, non-functionalized. I mean, there's a whole range of carbon nanotubes, and a lot of carbon nanotubes, especially the functionalized carbon nanotubes, are very, very advantageous and can be used extensively in drug delivery. And obviously there's no products out there, but there is a lot of research going on. And I just wanted to throw this in there. We were talking about the patent office previously. The patent office has issued 3 patents to 3 major companies, IBM, Hyperion, and NEC, that are essentially the same. And these are basic building block patents on carbon nanotubes. And the real applications of carbon nanotubes are going to be in nanoelectronics. But once you see products on the market, then you will see that all 3 of these companies are going to end up in major battles, and that'll hurt only the consumer. When there are products on the market, that's when people end up fighting. No one cares until there is money to be made. So carbon nanotubes can have a lot of issues like that. You can have these nanoscale silicon needles that can be used for drug delivery, insulin patches and so on. There could be surface elution on demand, for example, in stents. Obviously, there aren't any out there on the market, but as you know, stent technology, nanocoatings, for example, are a very important area of research, and it directly has impact in stent technology in medicine. So you can have nanoparticles that are in a polymer coating on a nanomagnetic layer, and then you could use a magnetic field to drive them out. And obviously you could have, so that's why the concept of surface elution on demand. So you could have, type A and type B drug particles, and then you could just release them on demand using magnetic field A to get A out and magnetic field B to have B out. So this sort of concept, one drug could be the actual therapeutic, the other could be the one that prevents the plaque formation at that site, for example, reocclusion. There's a lot of, you can read this paper. This paper lists a lot of different nanotherapeutics that are already on the market. So this is not an area where you are doing R&D. There's a lot of products that are already on the market. And I'm going to skip the next few slides. These are just up there so that you can see which companies are working on in this space. Abraxas actually has a product on the market. P. Civida is working on some very interesting implants. And there's a lot of other companies. These are all in the slides that you will get. So I'm going to sort of skip. I just laid out the general concepts behind a lot of these technologies. So what is the potential? Well, the potential of nano in medicine or nano in pharmacology or pharmaceutics is that there's still those, high production costs. Carbon nanotubes are more expensive to produce than gold, for example, per weight. And so on. There's a lot of bottlenecks still exist, but there are a lot of advances that have happened in the last decade. Unfortunately, the consumer is still, in awe with the cutesy applications of nano, rather than the real neat products like drug delivery and, laptop batteries that can last for 18 hours, things like that. That would be really exciting. And that is being developed by NEC, for example, with carbon nanotubes. And obviously, there's, unintended consequences. And then there's the FDA, which really is the foremost agency that handles all these products coming in, and it's having a really, really hard time. And you can see that when you visit them once a year, they have their open house when they get all the nano people in to get advice and decide on what to do and give us an update as to what they've been doing for the last year. That's when you realize the disarray at that organization, at that agency, and that's really impacting us, unfortunately. So there's some recommendations in this paper which we presented to them, and they're looking at it. With respect to this tox issue, this nanotox or nanotoxicology that you've been watching and reading about in the media especially, it's blown out of proportion a lot of times. The two test cases, in my view, are going to be nanosilver and carbon nanoparticles. There's a lot of oversimplified versions in the media. So the worry is that as a result of this PR battle that's really going on, between us, actually, the research community on one side, and some of these other groups like Greenpeace and so on that really have an agenda, I think they're sort of winning, and it's our job to make sure that we educate the public and excite them about the positive aspects of it. And so hopefully there won't be any regulation of it. That's what we are worried about. So what do you expect, in my final slide, what do you expect in the future, what's going to happen? Well, obviously there'll be early disease dissection and targeted therapy with respect to specific diseases, specific tissues, cancers and so on, obviously are the forefront of it. So this is how nano fits into the bigger scheme of pharma in a 20-minute talk, and how the FDA and the Patent Office are two very important agencies that when you're a researcher, you may not think about them, but to have real products on the market that then would impact your research in the lab, those two agencies are critical in my view. And with that, I end, and if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy.
Well, thank you. Question, please?
Is it clear whether the types of virus-like particles and protocells that our center is developing would be regulated as drugs or as devices?
That's a great question. And actually, we addressed that in that paper where I have those 3 recommendations, because the FDA is having a really, really hard time as to where to put these combination products. And their mode of the PMO, the way they classify it, it's out the door when it comes to nano. Your example, for example, they would be lost with that. And it's almost a 50-50 whether it's going to be a device or a product or a therapeutic. You don't know where it's going to end up.
It makes an enormous difference in how it's regulated.
Absolutely. And I actually have an example in there where it went to a court, and the court then was laughing at this. I'll send you the paper. And the FDA came up with its own nomenclature for that kind of a combination product. It was just bizarre, actually. It's reading science fiction. So, great question.
Next question, please.
Please, you first.
Thank you. I have a question about the patent dispute on the carbon nanotubes. Did the European Patent Office also give all three, or did they do the same overlapping patents that the U.S. Patent Office did?
As far as I had known, I don't think so, because we didn't find it when we did our paper. But we did find the 3 patents, and if you look at claim 1 of each patent, which is the heart of the patent, the claims of the patent, and these are early patents, so these are upstream patents, and the claims are basically congruent. They're identical.
So did the Europeans give just one of the 3 organizations?
I think
a
so.
patent?
That's a very good question. I haven't focused on that, and I don't think they've even issued. They may have seen the mess here, and that could have just prevented them from issuing it. But that's a good question. I'll look into it.
A related question is, I know that there is a divergence between the U.S. and Canadian patent offices and European patent offices with regard to giving patents on living forms of life. And it's a big divergence, and even on strings of human DNA that have been separately identified. I wonder if there are any similar divergences with regard to, basic forbidden areas of patenting with regard to nanotechnology.
Well, Europe is more cautious. They're definitely more cautious. Canada was the same thing, and you can look at the Harvard mouse, for example, the Canadian Supreme Court. It took a long time. There's a couple examples like that, genetically modified food, GMO, for example, organisms as well. And so with nanotechnology, I mean, it could be in the area where nano intersects stem cells, for example. That would probably be they'll be a little more cautious. It may drag on a little bit longer there. Issues like that, things of that nature that impact the human, that are more therapeutic, gene sequences. The Venter's patents that were granted in the U.S. in the early 90s, that was a purely business decision that the U.S. government made to basically issue all these hundreds and hundreds of patents that had no utility. You didn't even know what protein they coded. So that was a business decision to drive up their business. And then in the end, it all came to crashing down on them. So Europe is a lot more cautious. Canada is the same way. The U.S. sometimes moves with the policy. The patent law is based in law, and Thomas Jefferson wrote the basic statutes in the Constitution. But it's obviously impacted by the policymakers in Washington. It shouldn't be, but it is. So.
Okay.
Another question, please.
Yes. I would like to ask you, what is your opinion regarding the route of administration, as how FDA will react according to the route of administration, topical, oral, injectable? I think it's different.
According to what administration?
The route of administration of a dosage form, the final dosage form.
Boy, we should take some of you guys to that thing that they had in the summer. These are great questions. And these were some of the questions that were asked there. And they really struggled to answer them. A lot of times they said, we are going to take him. I don't know. It's really difficult. The route of administration obviously is critical as to, what the outcome will be in a lot of cases.
Because there is a lot of bad press, for example, for nanoparticles for topical administration regarding cosmetics, as you have already raised in one of your slides. How they are going to react to such kind of product already in the market?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of products that are already nanoparticle based that are cosmetics. I mean, L'Oreal has did marketing blitz many years ago with nano, and then they had they spent millions of dollars to take the word nano out of their advertising materials because of the public backlash. The products are still out on the market, but it's really a battle almost being waged in the media, and I think we as researchers should should educate and advertise the benefits of nanotechnology more and nanomedicine more than some of these articles that you read in the Washington Post. We should take them to task, and it's lacking in details. They start calling nano asbestos, and there's this whole terminology, this lingo that has come up centering around nano that is scary, that doesn't make sense. And there's these journals on nanotox and so on that are just talking about very narrow area, for example, of carbon nanotubes with a specific range, specific molecular weight, and so on. But that's another great question. I wish I could give you the right answer. I don't know.
Thank
Other questions? Again, when you're dealing with this ultimate in smallness, the nanotechnology, I guess you can get down to quantum one of these days, but it's hard to keep the big picture in mind. But just one, and the human body's pretty complicated. As I needn't tell all of you, that's what you're working on. But just to mention one thing, we have, when we talk about targeting bacteria, there's a huge population of bacterial cells in humans that have beneficial effects. They live symbiotically. So we even have more bacterial cells in our body than we do our own cells. So that might be a consideration sometimes, particularly with oral use of drugs. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for